So the next session is on crowdfunding, do's and don'ts, and we have Martin and Pranav. Woo!
Ska jag sätta mig?
Thanks. So let us quickly introduce ourselves. So my name is Martin. I'm actually appointed a thought leader by Kickstarter, one of the major crowdfunding platforms, because I've been part in helping several over 10 projects that have been successfully crowdfunded in the consumer electronics space here from Sweden. And it's my pleasure to sort of interview one of the absolute leading role models in this space. Pranav, one of the co-founders of Flic, which is a smart button. So I think we would like to know more about Flic first off. Like, could you tell us a little bit what Flic is and how you came up with that?
Sure. Hello, everyone. Thank you for having us, and thank you for the kind introduction. This is Flic. It's a wireless shortcut button that can trigger your favorite functions on your smartphone, so you don't need to pull up the phone, unlock the screen, find that app, and then trigger it. So it's a physical extension that you can attach in your house, so you can order an Uber or control your Spotify. Or we've done partnerships with like Domino's Pizza, so you can order a pizza with this button. A lot of different goofy things, but also serious things like a safety button. If you're walking home at night, something happens, push the button, send a distress message to your friends and family. And it connects to an app, and you determine what functions this button should have.
So that's kind of what it is. How did you come up with the big idea to do the like?
I think the main thing, we're three founders. It's me, Joachim, and Amir. Joachim actually wanted to stop using snooze. It's called dip, I think, in English. And he wanted to have an easy way to track his snooze consumption. And he built an app with the big green button in the middle of the screen. And when he pushed it, it would track or like record every time he took a snooze. But it was too tedious to always pull up the phone. And then he thought of, let's do an extension and like have a physical push button. And that's kind of where it started. And yeah, it became a thing between us three, and we had different use cases. For me, it was the safety thing, for example.
Did you feel unsafe?
No, yeah, I guess I just saw that that it would work pretty well. Like if you're walking home at night, and instead of just calling someone all the time and saying like I'm here, you can just have this to track every 10 meters or whatever.
Sounds like a problem handsome people have. I haven't so much. But so I think we're going to sort of, just a disclaimer, I think we're going to talk mostly about hardware, IoT, or software that somehow relates to hardware, because that's our backgrounds. Those are the kind of projects we've been mostly involved in. Obviously, you can use crowdfunding for other things. So within crowdfunding, there's equity crowdfunding, raising capital through crowdfunding, right? Or it's reward-based, and that's typically where hardware products work really well, because you're giving someone money and you're going to get something physical back from that. So I think we're going to like focus in that area. There's also other areas like games, for example, that can build good communities for crowdfunding platforms. Something that hasn't been so successful is apps, just straight apps, because it's a little bit abstract to back. Like you don't get that physical thing back, or you don't get to share in the company. So, but it's been very successful for several things. So, as I mentioned, it's been very successful for you. You raised around $1 million on the platform Indiegogo. So now it sounds like a no-brainer that you should have gone there. But you came back also, and you raised more than $500,000, $650,000 on your second large product. So was that an obvious choice to go to crowdfunding? You had the idea. You went into the KTH incubator, KTH, the Royal Technology School's incubator. When you were there, was it obvious that you should go into crowdfunding? How did crowdfunding become an option for you guys?
I think it was never the first choice for us. We kind of understood from reading up on it that needs, or like our perception of crowdfunding was that you need to create a lot of assets, you need to do a lot of things before, and that requires money, and you need to like have the product pretty far along. And I think it's like we did like everyone else. We tried to raise funds in the traditional sense of going to venture capitalists or business angels. To try to raise money, but that was really hard. I think we went around for roughly a year without any investment, and then I think we were through like an investment. Like there was one company that wanted to invest into us, and that was a tedious process. And then the end of it, we actually said no to that investment, and then we stood there with absolutely no money. And then we said like, our last shot is crowdfunding, and then we actually did a crowdfunding campaign and focused like 2 months intensely to create this crowdfunding campaign.
So you were very bootstrapped into crowdfunding, right? Like you took low salaries, you didn't have someone paying you a nice apartment.
No.
So you're saying crowdfunding, is there other options for hardware companies? Like what would be your, if you didn't crowdfund, what would be the second option, you think?
I think it's, I don't know. It was really hard to raise capital for an early stage hardware company. It's a tedious process. It's not a lot of investors that wants to do those kinds of investments. And I completely understand them. I mean, when we came here, we had no IP on Flic, and we pitched this product. And I mean, we said we wanted to build a product that was going to ship to millions of people and build a brand, and we had no actual experience to it. It was kind of I mean, I understand that they didn't invest. I don't know what our alternative was. Of course, we did get soft funding from like Vinnova and Almi, so I strongly urge you all to look into those two, I don't know, vehicles. To raise some kind of funds, to do kind of prototyping and get a product to the first stage so you actually can show the product. That, I don't know, I don't think like we would have mustered to, or like we wouldn't have been able to continue unless we would have done crowdfunding. Because we actually exhausted all our options within the investment community, both in the States and in Sweden. So I think like that would have been it for us.
Interesting. I do meet similar companies. First time I met Pranav, they managed to get, I think, a Vinnova grant to do a trip to Barcelona to Mobile World Congress. So I met the entire, you and your two co-founders, and you were very humble, which is cool, but you also had that grit. Like, I knew these guys were gonna make it somehow because you had that like look in your eyes that this was like it for you guys. Like you were gonna make it. So. But you also got, like, quite early, I think this was around the same time that you did the crowdfunding, you got into another incubator in the US called Highway 1, which is, I think, at least top 5 globally as a hardware incubator. I guess you had to pitch yourself getting into that too. Like, how did you get in? Was that the same thing? You looked humble, but you had the grit, or what it a fantastic slide deck, or?
Yeah, I mean, it was a regular pitch. I think in the States they kind of saw all these consumer electronic goods popping up, and there were a couple of.
When was this? Sorry.
I really don't know, but I think 4 years ago. Time flies.
Yeah.
So I think like you had Tile and Tracker that were two emerging like consumer electronic things. So I think we were kind of lucky that those two kind of pioneered the way for us, and that people saw that, wow, this might actually be something. And then I mean, like we did boost a lot about having partnerships with different companies that might have been very loose, but
handshakes.
Yeah, kind of those bro deals, or I don't know. So I think
fake it until you make it.
No, I mean no, it wasn't fake, but it was like we kind of showed them different verticals what Flic could be used in, and not only as a gimmick and a gadget, and they kind of believed in that.
Interesting. So you had your own kind of growth hypothesis, kind of like this is how we're going to be able to scale this beyond the consumer. So I'm interested, like, so crowdfunding, from my perception, being part of projects now for maybe 7 years on the crowdfunding platform, has changed quite a lot. Like there was for example, it was much easier getting news articles 5 years ago if you had a successful Kickstarter or even a Kickstarter or Indiegogo or a crowdfunding campaign. But now they're a little bit saturated. There have been a lot of failures, like someone like Coolest Cooler, like basically an ice cooler raising $10 million and then not being able to deliver for 2 years. So that's like the mental model a little bit, like thinking about crowdfunding projects. But yet you went back like a little bit over a year ago to do your new product, which is the, maybe you can explain your new product better than I can.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, the main thing was the first time we crowdfunded, it was really to survive. It was really to raise capital to actually build this product and get this going. So that was kind of the pure, the meant, I mean, I don't know, like that's what you should do with crowdfunding. I think the initial thought of crowdfunding is that way. And then, I mean, at that point, people were writing about crowdfunding campaigns. So you're completely right. Things have shifted in the media space, but then we went back to crowdfunding roughly a year ago or 8 months ago to crowdfund a development of our an extension to our product. Well, thank you so much.
You talking now.
Yeah, an extension of our product, which is a hub. And it was kind of, the hub was, because like now the Flic button connects to your phone, but with the hub you can actually put it in a restaurant, and then you can put Flic buttons on all the tables, and then you can have, one press, get the bill, or double press, get water, and it would actually make sense in a B2B perspective. Thank you so much. And in that time, we didn't know if this product would be appreciated by our community, so we didn't want to develop it without trying it out. So then we thought, let's do it through crowdfunding to kind of validate that this is something that we should move forward with. And then we raised roughly, I think it was like $700,000. And it was mainly, we didn't do a lot of efforts to reach outside our community. The majority of sales actually came from our existing customers, which was great. So that's a way to do crowdfunding as well, to kind of validate to yourself if this is worthwhile developing internally. Yeah, I hope that answers the question.
Great. I find it interesting. I think the campaign did 650,000, but being a true hustler, you rounded up to 700,000. I think it did. That's a good point. No, so I'm interested. So you were a team, and you were willing to pitch this and hustle. But what was your, we're talking about do's and don'ts for crowdfunding, right? So what's the best recommendations you can send out there to do before your campaign, right? Because to me, it seems there's almost this mathematical equations, like you have 200 email addresses, or you have 2,000 email addresses, and you think about how many of our following can we convert to our campaign? How many will we get from this article, or this way of reaching out to customers? You need to sort of have a thought about, will this campaign succeed before you do it? And it felt like you had a very strong vision on how to achieve that, or early on you were quite passionate about generating a community. Do you have some concretes, this is how we created our community before crowdfunding, and this was our success, keys to success, so to say? Yeah,
I mean, there's a lot of misconceptions, I think, around crowdfunding. A lot of people put a lot of time and effort into the video, for example. I think for our first campaign that raised $1 million, we spent roughly $2,000 for the whole video production. Everything was done by ourselves and our friends. A lot of people also think that PR is something that really pushed our campaign. It was a huge part of it. You shouldn't take that away, but it wasn't the majority part. The majority part of our sales and that actually drove our campaign was our community. And it's really, everyone talks about a community, that you should have a community, and people think it's based on the product, but it's actually a lot of hard work to do, to create that community. And we did a lot of hustly things, or however you say. I mean, just giving you some concrete tips, we read up a lot on crowdfunding campaigns. We studied like every crowdfunding campaign that came out there that was similar to what we were actually doing. One example was that we took Prezi, for example, which was a competitor that launched roughly like 6 months before, raised I think like $150,000. We actually went through, I don't know if this is possible still at Kickstarter, but you could actually see all the backers, and we actually like found those backers, like looked up their emails, and then actually like pulled them into an Excel, and then we wrote a personal email to every single one of them. And we did this with like 5 or 6 campaigns. I think it took like 3 weeks of us 3 doing this. It took a long time, but then actually we had 2,000 people that we sent personal messages, not like a copy-paste message, but we actually sent and said like, hey, we're launching this campaign in roughly a month. You know, could you have a look at this? And we asked them some questions, and then most of them actually subscribed because they were actually buying a similar product. So it's like those things that you need to find out. It's also like before the campaign, it's not like we spent 2.5 months full time, the whole team working on this campaign, and that was building this community. And we actually launched the site called Flic is Coming, which was kind of an incentive program to drive, to incentivize people to share this product to their friends and family. And we had a bar that, like, if you shared a shared this to a number of people that actually joined, you would actually receive something when we launched the crowdfunding campaign. And that went tremendously well, and we had, I don't know how many emails in the end of it. But something that you need to think about is that your email list, like what actually makes, like you can actually calculate how much money you will make from a crowdfunding campaign. Like you take your email list and you take 3%. So 3% of your email list, if it's a good email list, will convert, roughly. It depends on your quality of that email list. So you can understand how many emails you actually need to have. So the work into building this community is like imperative in order to have a successful crowdfunding campaign. And that's a lot of things that people spend money on video, people spend money on PR, but they don't focus enough on building this community. And there's a lot of ways. You can just Google ways to build communities and try to figure out like how can I drive as many emails as possible.
Yeah, I think as an entrepreneur, most people are very passionate about how their idea will change the world or the market or the reality for the customers. But as an entrepreneur, it's often missed that you have to be such a hustler in terms of selling. So early before crowdfunding, if I advise someone, people think like if I get an article in Wired magazine or a very big publication, that will drive so much traffic. I know several campaigns that got much more traffic from going to a very niche, maybe even kind of local newspaper like Jakt och Fiske, like a hunting magazine in Sweden with like a very much smaller circulation. But going to them saying like, look, I love you and I would love to place an ad once we have revenue. Maybe if I can give you my product and mention you in my campaign page, could I get your email list to your subscribers? These kind of hustles are really like how you have to think about building a community. Identifying who is highly likely to convert being a fan to your particular product. So I think most campaigns today, they can't rely on PR or media as their growth engine. They have to think about Facebook groups. And I think like brands like Daniel Wellington, very successful like watch brand, early days they were like interested in like everyone loves circle pasta groups on Facebook. That's how growth hacky they were. Like they really wanted to just get more people that they could reach out to personally, saying, hey, we got a new watch. So for some brands, a broader perspective might work. And for some brands, especially if you have a niche technology product, really think about how could I grow an email list of people in that particular niche and find actors in that space.
Yeah.
So I think you had that hustle early on that you were you're looking at other campaigns, trying to see if you could mine some of their backers, but also not like spamming them.
No.
Putting in the work of getting a personal message, so you're not like grouping them all in one big list. You're like actually have their first name in the letter you're writing them. I think that level of detail is really what sort of builds your first early following or community or whatever word. Yeah. So that's something I can highly recommend, having a model where there's this like basically math in the crowdfunding campaign. So if you're fully funded early on, you have you get higher listed on the page. You get a story that you're fully funded, so backers are more likely to back you because it's already funded. So now it's more of a, my backing is more likely to actually happen. So there's a weird dynamic there because you see a lot of hardware project. I would say a hardware project that reaches for less than like $300,000 isn't really serious, because that's how much money it costs to make tooling and certification and building a team that you pay a salary to. So lower than that is like, okay, how are you going to make it happen? But on the flip side of that, I can't remember what the goals of your campaign was, but I'm guessing you set them so you knew, based on how many backers you had, that there's a high chance that we get fully funded early, right?
Yeah.
Or at least like halfway there. So what's your thoughts about setting, if you set it too low, it's just unrealistic that money would ever help you actually build a startup, so it's not gonna make the project happen. But how did you think about setting the goal of the Kickstarter campaign? Because at least Kickstarter is all or nothing. If you don't reach your goal, the project doesn't happen, but that's also a major dynamic in making people believe that if it's successful, it's actually gonna happen.
Yeah. Yeah, I think for us, we kind of understood that as well, and our engineers really said, like, we won't be able to make this with less than $150,000. There are mechanisms that you need to take in count. So, for example, on Indiegogo, you need to reach 30% of your goal to hit the go-go factor. And when you hit the go-go factor, you actually bumped up to the first page and front page, and that would generate a lot of money. And that's really imperative to do within the first 3 days, otherwise you won't hit this factor. So we needed to lower the bar. We actually put our funding goal on $80,000, and that was what we felt, looking at our email list, that we felt like, okay, we will probably hit this within 4 or 5 days. So we will reach 30%, because in the beginning it's the fastest growth. We will probably reach that within 3 days, hopefully. And then we crossed our fingers, but then actually we reached $80,000, I think, within 36 hours, which was really great, and we were overwhelmed by it. So, I mean, if you want to crowdfund, you need to be realistic about it, that you won't be able to produce it for like a low sum, like $80,000 or even $100,000. But you need to play the game like, I mean, that's the rules that are set in crowdfunding, right? You need to put a low goal, because otherwise you won't be pushed to the front page. People won't convert. Like, you don't want to have PR unless you have 30% of your funding goal reached, because then people won't convert from an article into actually buying the product when they land into your page. So you kind of want to hit those metrics that you need to do, and you need to skew the game kind of to be able to. I mean, it's like going in Tour de France and not being doped. Or like, do you say doped? I don't know. Like pump juiced.
Doped sounds fishy.
Doped, yeah. Doped, yeah, that sounds bad. Juiced, I guess. No, but like, you need to play at those rules. But you have to be realistic, because otherwise you screw yourself, you screw your backers, and it can be legal repercussions. So you need to be realistic about it. But you need to fix it.
Cool. I think we just used the last couple of minutes to open up to questions. So if there's anyone planning to do a crowdfunding campaign, where's that? Here it is. I can throw this at you really hard to scare you even more to answer any question. Is there anyone out there that want to ask us about crowdfunding? I hope so. No questions. We're super, super clear. So try to talk closely so everyone hears through the... Yeah. Is it on? I can't hear it. Is it on? The microphone?
Hello?
Yeah.
Hello, good. My name is Tina from KTH. We started for a hardware used for mindfulness and meditation for every day, and we have we are thinking about using crowdfunding. But the question is, when do you think it's a good time? And if we are in the process of building the prototype, how about the IPR things?
Sorry, the IPR?
Yeah, how to protect the
IP,
product.
the intellectual property, okay.
Exactly.
It's a very good question. Generally in startups, I can take that back, so I can throw it at someone else. Thank you for a good question. Generally in startups, there's this balance, right? Like build fast, fail fast kind of attitude. And in hardware, the lead times are a little bit longer. It takes time to do tooling. Shipping takes 3 months. If you're manufacturing in China, getting it to a warehouse, sending it out to customers. So it's not as fast as releasing an app. But it's also playing the rules of getting your idea out to the market first. So it's a tricky way to navigate. I know we helped a company called Narrative that was a wearable camera. And before Narrative, they were called Memoto. And actually, Motorola's legal team had Hello Moto registered for the Motorola phones. So they were sued and had to change name, and they almost ran out of money to change that. But they survived that. Similar thing happened to you guys, right?
Yeah. I mean, it wasn't similar, but that was a patent troll. But yeah, we got sued. I mean, go to your question. I think if you can fund it in other ways than crowdfunding, it's good to raise a round. If you can, you should do it, like from venture capital, because then you can even do a crowdfunding after that. But if you have no other choice, I think it's just go ahead and then work around it. It depends on how endurable you and your team is and when you need the actual money. On the IP side, we don't have any IP on our product, and it's worked out pretty well anyways, I guess.
Yeah, I think one important final note on that is it actually only cost 8,000 crowns to register a brand on the EU web page, and it's so easy that anyone can do it. So as soon as you formulated a team and you have a brand, just do that by yourself, and then you can actually build the application in the US on that date. So that's at least you have a brand protected, right? And it only takes a couple of months to get that. So I would recommend any startup to do that process. Then you already own some IP. For more complex hardware issues, it's hard to say. But for most consumer-facing things, the biggest IP is your community, your brand, that you actually were the first brand to do this thing in your space. So that's what you should be good at building. The biggest community is going to be your biggest thing to defend. So sorry, no more questions, but feel free to contact us afterwards if you're thinking more about crowdfunding.